Hi. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of a retrospective, which I mentioned in one of my past videos that I wanted to start doing going into the 2021 season about this really big upset that happened today, being Shock losing to the Outlaws 3-2, which, if you look at that scoreline, you are in most cases fucking horrified, because this is a team that, in meaning Outlaws when talking about this, is a team that no one expected to do well, a team that even the players on their own team were kind of being very dismissive of and being very toxic towards, like pre-season or during the off-season in general. So this is a really big upset and a really big turnaround for a team that really no one thought could do it. But for the most part, that's not really what I want to talk about. I really want to talk about kind of, I guess in a way, picking the brains of Shock a little bit and seeing if their ego is what really got the better of them. Because if I had to make a decision, I think that's exactly what we saw. I really am not happy with just saying, oh, Outlaws is the better team, or that game was really as competitive as a lot of people made it out to be. Now let me back up that statement with saying, hands down, that was the greatest series of the matches that did happen on Sunday. I was really happy to watch it, that I actually watched it live on Twitch, which I also might upload a stream highlight of, and you can hear my live reactions and just me all around flaming each team for playing certain ways poorly. But realistically, how competitive of a match was this? And when I say competitive, I don't mean the scoreline, I don't mean the map score, because this was a 6-map series, which, if you don't know, means that they even drew on a map and went further than the normal distance, which would be a map 5. But dissecting the game a little bit further, I guess I really want to bring up stuff like Tayo playing in the first map, where people have been like kind of joking about Tayo not really getting any playtime, because if you look at the entire San Francisco Shock roster, Tayo is not a player that you want to see starting, just in terms of hero pool, in terms of skill. Like, you know, you can sure turn him into like a specialist that you need and play him for that certain thing, sure, but what Shock really fucked up on here was doubting Outlaws straight out of the gate by immediately being like, okay, we can play whatever the fuck we want and we'll win. And I also want to back all of this up by saying I don't want to show any bias here towards either of these teams. I did used to really cheer for Shock a lot of the time, but now I'm more of a Chengdu fan, so I don't really have a I don't have any like bets on anyone here, nor do I really think that like this was a super make or break series for any of these teams. And I will also back up, which I guess I'm gonna have to do a lot of, and say that this is not entirely Tayo's fault. Am I saying that putting Tayo in for the very first map put a really bad taste in my mouth? Yes. Does that mean Tayo is the reason that they lost to the Outlaws? Not necessarily. This is a whole bunch of events that took place, on top of Outlaws performing very well. And even then, it wasn't like Outlaws played flawlessly. Happy, I guess, took insane amounts of Adderall and just went fucking ham, as well as there were flaws on the Outlaws teams, as in, you know, map 5, or I guess map 6 rather, on Havana, where Dante literally got no value whatsoever off of his tracer pick, which once again I brought up and flamed Dante for a lot about in my little live stream that I did. So let me stop beating around the bush and actually, I guess, get into the retrospective of why did all of this happen. And I think that the reasons are a lot simpler than a lot of people think, but they're also a lot harsher and a much tougher pill to swallow than just a black and white, they just had an off day. Instead, this was them immediately egoing the other team by trying to play Tayo and thinking that it would be very funny. Secondly, which is probably going to be my hottest take in all of this, a lot of the times when they played Glister, they didn't need to. Like, Glister on, I believe it was Dorado, did very, very poorly, as contrast to having someone, and I don't even know who the other DPS was playing, but like, if you have someone like Striker, why are you putting Glister in to play Tracer? It doesn't make sense. Not to mention, they put Jake in for main support, and even with a DPS player coming in to play main support and play Brig for the Outlaws, Glister still wasn't able to abuse that enough, which I think isn't unacceptable, but it's very lackluster if you want to kind of consider yourself a hyperflex and say that you're like a very, very top contender for hitscan players. Like, there were a lot of times of seeing Glister just kind of full on fading in the backline, sometimes even being on like second point while a fight was happening, or in between fights even, which isn't inherently bad, but there were definitely times where Glister was out of fights entirely on Tracer, which is just unacceptable. So I've kind of just been hitting the same couple of nails a few times throughout all of this, but I guess in terms of what this actually means, I don't want this to discredit Outlaws' win whatsoever, but I want other teams, especially Shock, to learn from this, where if you watch very old Shock VODs of like when they first started being very dominant, you gotta see where they would be really dominant throughout an entire series, and then as soon as it came down to like last map or whatever, they would, whip out a meme pick and just do whatever they want, and they would still roll the other team. And a couple of things have now come from this, being, firstly, the Shock are different now, where overall, like, yes, you still have a very good and insane like range of very well-rounded players currently, but if you're going to be able to keep to that same kind of flow that you guys used to have doing that way back when, a key thing needs to be remembered, that this was at the end of the series. You put Tayo in as a like starting fucking person straight out of the gate, which is cool if you actually believe in him, but it's pretty much like set in stone that Tayo isn't a starter for this team, and if anything will come in as a specialist if needed. But like the times that the only time that they put Tayo in, the amount of times that he was dying first in fights was incredible, and you can't do that on Symmetra if you're playing a Symmetra comp in Lijiang. It just doesn't work well for you. It's never gonna go well for you. And looking back now, Shock still do deserve this loss on their record. Not as in they are worse than the Outlaws, but they deserve it as in a little way to keep them in check, because the same way Outlaws just did the Shock, Chengdu just did the Shanghai. It's starting to show that the Titans of the Overwatch League can be beaten. And now I'm pretty sure the ball is in the Shock's court, which is basically going to be whether they come back with a vengeance and just start working their asses off, or if they just proceed to still not really care, still play Tayo, still play whatever the fuck they want, and then just kind of treat it as it is what it is. I guess it's also worth mentioning that Outlaws did play fairly well in terms of, You got to see a big highlight reel from people like Jonggu, people like Happy. Piggy did fairly well, at least consistent throughout the entire series. I will say though, I didn't see as much out of Crimzo in this series in particular than the Dallas series, but overall, like, they played well and they deserve a win. But I definitely think that you cannot talk about this specific win or this specific loss in the Shock's case without putting a little asterisk there and really knowing why they lost, because this isn't a matter of teams getting out mechanicked and people getting just like outplayed entirely. This is now coming down to certain teams just not having respect or not having the discipline to just play out a series normally, because obviously they, meaning Shock, have played like Violet on DPS, and Violet has shown promise on those characters. That's fine. That part I can completely agree with because you've seen results from that. But I would love to see where in scrims Tayo is a starter on Lijiang. Like, unless they really were like, Tayo, you're gonna be our Symmetry specialist, which if they did, I'm sorry, but how the fuck are you getting picked first so much? And this also isn't to say that everyone on the Shock played horribly, or that, you know, it's solely just reliant on like Tayo and Glister that the entire team fell through. This was a like collective effort that I think the entire team needs to take on the chin. I definitely think that people like Choi, Super, Smurf still performed well throughout the entire series. Violet, of course, as well. But all I ask is that if you are going to still really take this loss seriously if you're a Shock fan, or take this win very seriously if you're an Outlaws fan, just at least put a tiny little asterisk and know that this isn't all because they just were like in turn better. This is a due to, as I said before, a lack of discipline, just a all around like really bad like way to go down for the Shock. And I'm gonna start wrapping up this video because I really just want them to fucking learn about this and learn from this, because it's so sad to see such a promising team that is still starting to like slip a little bit just because they can't get over their own egos. That's very strange to me, and I really hope it's something that can be learned from. Anyways, that's it from me. I really still enjoyed this series watching it, and as I said earlier, I'm gonna be making at least I believe a little compilation of a stream highlight, and I'll probably have that uploaded, I don't know when, but I'll get it all figured out and hopefully be able to make good content out of it. No really telling, but anyways, follow me on Twitter if you ever want to know when I upload. I appreciate the fuck out of all of you and love you so much. And with that all being said, I will see you when I see you. Later.